Hey, what up, everybody? This is Stevie Breach coming to you here. I'm on the iPad, which has a little bit of a bigger camera, so that's why it seems like I'm all up in your face in this video. But a lot of times, people will contact me on Twitter or ask me a question here or there, asking me what wrestling podcasts I listen to. And podcasts, honestly, are a big part of my day. Honestly, I listen to a lot of podcasts on my iPod, in my car, when I'm driving to work, when I'm coming home from work. I sit and I listen to a podcast on my lunch on days that there's nothing on the WWE network that I want to watch. I go to the gym, I work out. Sometimes when I go to bed late at night, because I don't want the television on, the Apple TV, you can play podcasts on and the TV screen goes black so you can hear it, but you don't need to see it, so you can sort of lay in bed with your eyes closed, and it helps you fall asleep a little bit better. Um, you know, I really, really like wrestling podcasts. I think that most of the podcasts I listen to throughout my day are wrestling ones. I do have a few sports ones. I used to listen to a sort of topic, talk show throughout the day, called The Regular Guys, which is based out of Atlanta. And if I can shoot on the show for a while, they fired one of the guys, which is my favorite guy. And I tried to listen to the show for a while after that, and it just wasn't the same, without Eric. I tried to listen to Eric's new show that came out. It wasn't the same without Larry, even though I think he's a dick. But it is what it is. So I just I lost that show to listen to, which was my main source of getting like news and social, just stuff that's out there in the world going on. But this is gonna be my top five. If I can plug my buddy Bobby, real fast, he's got a new podcast coming out called the Irish Whipcast. His first episode came up, and I was honestly very sort of impressed. He was able to get his podcast up onto iTunes, which is probably the easiest way to get it. I'll have a link in the description for you. Bobby was the man behind one of my favorite wrestling podcasts from back in the day, called the Billy and Bob Wrestling Show. I thought that was a great show. I sort of was a little bit mad when it came to an end, but Bobby's back. He's got a new show with the co-host Kick on Hawks, where they talk about wrestling from the past, and they reviewed two shows. One was an ECW show, and it's slipping on my mind what the other one was. But they're going to be coming at you, I think, every other week. With a good podcast. It's a good amount of time, so you can check it out, and maybe they'll talk about a show you've never seen before, and you want to check it out. So Billy, um, no, Bobby, and Cake on Hawks. I wish you guys luck in the future, and hopefully you guys will make it on there. But here's my top five list of top wrestling podcasts that I subscribe to that I think you guys would really get a kick out of if you guys went and check them out also. All right, guys, here's number five on the list to start it out, since this is the top five. It's going to be the Chris Jericho Show, which is one of the shows based off of Podcast One, which is, I think, is just, if you want to go to it online, or if you wanted to find it on iTunes, it's pretty easy. But it's podcast, and then the word one, ONE, .com. Jericho has a pretty good show in my mind. There's some things that I really like about it. There's some things that I really just hate about it. I think that if you are a really big Chris Jericho fan, you would really dig this. He finds his way to talk about everything in wrestling, from big pay-per-views. He always gives his wrestling predictions. He talks, for a few minutes about what he thinks about Monday Night Raw. It was pretty cool that he had a show go live the day after his WWE return, so he almost had the scoop, interviewing himself and talking about how they hit him backstage and how he got into the arena and everything that he did to make sure that it was a big surprise when he came out and interrupted Miz on Monday Night Raw a few weeks ago. He has a thing that he started, when basically he was doing the show. One week, somebody left it behind a cowbell, and he just started banging on the cowbell, and he used to sing "Working for the Weekend." Since it was Friday, as with the day the show goes up, he used to always, I think he still does, play the Rebecca Black song for a minute when he starts out the show, and that sort of evolved into him, doing the Mark Henry theme one week, and just different '80s themes that use the cowbell, and he's really good with music, and he gets down with it. With Jericho, when he does the wrestling predictions, he sort of acts like he's interviewing this janitor who works at the radio station that he does his show at. So it's through this weird voice. He also one time interviewed a ghost on there. Just when it comes down to it, when Jericho is just straight up bantering and just talking with us before the guest gets on, I can't stand the show. Most of the time, we'll fast forward, the first few parts until I hear him banging on the cowbell, and I'll stop there. Maybe every once in a while he might suck me in, but I don't think I ever really get through all of his just uninterrupted banter, just him talking to us about things that are going on. Jericho is not all about wrestling on his show. He's been able to brand out, and he makes sure that he gets guests that other people have, because I think that's one thing that a lot of people sort of don't like about the wrestling podcast is like, it seems like these guys get booked by Podcast One and they just make their rounds, where MVP is on everybody's show almost in the same week or within a week period. And they tell the same stories over and over again. So, Jericho has had a lot of wrestlers on his show. Highlights of his shows were the Chavo Guerrero shows. I think that those two shows, or it might have even been one. Yeah, it was back-to-back shows. Because one, he talked about Eddie Guerrero and the days leading up to his death. And the other one, he talked about Chris Benoit and the days leading up to his death. And, Chavo was really close with both of those guys. Chavo being one of the only wrestlers to ever be at Chris Benoit's house in Alpharetta, Georgia. He just didn't let people into his world. But one night it came down to, it just made more sense if Chris would have brought Chavo to the house and he would have spent the night. And, Chris marked out at that when he said that he had done that, because Jericho had known about the mystique about, Benoit, and they sort of both told their stories about what was going on. And Chavo told stories about how he was with Eddie, the night before he died. And there was just this freak incident where Eddie called him and said that he wanted to talk to him, and Chavo called him back. And then when he called him back, he said, "No, don't worry about it. Well, we'll just deal with it tomorrow." And then he woke up the next day, and Eddie was dead. So that's definitely a must-hear episode that you must check out. But then there's also episodes with a lot of musicians that I really don't sort of dig that much. He's one of the only people to interview Bubba Ray Dudley. That's another must-see show that I thought was really, really good. And then he interviewed some Canadian Olympic star, and I didn't really dig that episode. So, there's some pluses and some minuses to Jericho's show, but it's number 5. Give it a hit up on iTunes, and maybe you'll dig what you hear. Number 4 on the list is going to be one of the oldest wrestling podcasts there is. I know that when it came out around 2011, I think is when it first came out. It's been on for a long time. He just celebrated episode 200, so whatever 200 weeks in are from right now would be The Art of Wrestling with Colt Cabana. Colt, has sort of come into his own. He sort of used this podcast to sort of air his grievances with WWE, and sometimes he comes across as pretty bitter at the way things went down. He thought he was a better wrestler than WWE ever used him when he was in developmental. Never really got to show his his real wrestling skills. Once he got brought up to WWE, he got sort of like the good old creative has nothing for you after, being on TV and doing jobs. I can't remember who it was, Kane and Great Khali. I'll be 100% honest with you. I knew about, Colt's online wrestling talk show that was on the WWE network. I don't think I ever saw him on SmackDown wrestle. I think I missed the whole run of everything that was going on there. But I don't want to punch Colt Cabana in the stomach and make him feel bad, because he honestly does give us a free show. That's one of the reasons why every time I see Colt, I make sure I hit him up at the merch table. I get everything I can get, from an autograph and a picture. I still need a fucking Colt Cabana t-shirt, but he never has the one that I want when I see him. Maybe someday I got to hit him up on welovecolt.com, or is it coltmerch.com? One of those, or one or the other. Go buy some Colt Cabana stuff. I keep on meaning to go over to the MP3 site that he does, where he's got some bonus stuff that goes along with The Art of Wrestling, where he does like wrestling movies. He does the audio commentary like they did for No Holds Barred and things like that. But Colt Cabana has interviewed almost everybody there is. You know, when he did Stone Cold Steve Austin, it was almost like I marked out for him, like as a friend, because sometimes when you listen to these wrestling podcasts, you sort of get close to him. Colt Cabana talks for a good 5-10 minutes before each show, before he plays his song of the week, and sometimes he tells you some very intriguing things about his life that you probably wouldn't share with a lot of people, and he shares it with all of us. And you know, he's talked about how he's had bad booking deals with people, and on last week's show, I'm a few weeks behind. I think I was listening to the Mason Ryan show, which is a few weeks ago, but he was talking about taking his first weekend off in almost 5 years and going to the lake and just, you know, sort of sitting back and trying to relax, even though that he really couldn't he find a way to do it because he wanted to be out, you know, at a show. He wanted to be out, you know, watching wrestling and talking and mingling with the fans out there. I'm not going to say that Colt Cabana is running out of guys to interview, but it seems like he's interviewed just about anybody. But I mean, he has made stars out of people. You know, there was a time in the Wrestling Road Diaries Part 2 when Cliff Compton is basically saying the only reason he's a part of this documentary, the only reason he's on this tour that they're on, is because of the trip to Nigeria with Luke Gallows, and he went on Colt's podcast, and that episode just blew up from just not being able to even believe the story that Cliff went on, and just, if it wasn't for the CNN news clip about them getting back from Nigeria, I don't think I would have believed it. I just, it's too funny to believe. It's almost like you would think that Cliff and Colt sat down and wrote that script out, you know, word for word to see what was going on, talking about all the shit that Udi was doing, and, you know, basically Cliff being held at gunpoint at the hotel because, you know, Udi hadn't paid the bill for him, and just basically, you know, Cliff Compton having to pay out to the hotel bill, which is, you know, he didn't get paid for the tour, and he had to pay for his hotel. He just got fucked to go to Nigeria, pretty much. But I mean, like, nothing really comes to mind as like the greatest episode. I know the Dave Meltzer episode was really good. I know that the MVP episode was really good. Go check out episode 200. You know, where he made his own sort of best of. There was 5 clips along the way. I know that Cesaro was on there, and Antonio Cesaro talked about his bond with the Honky Tonk Man, and that was pretty fucking funny and pretty good. So I mean, just go check out that. It's basically like listening to 5 episodes in one. If you want to, you can go back and listen to episode 100 where he's interviewed by CM Punk, and the show's sort of about himself. That's a pretty good one. CM Punk is episode 2. Christopher Daniels, a lot of guys. I mean, a lot of guys when they were getting signed by WWE and they were, you know, going under developmental. He would have episodes with them in the past, and I was using those to catch up and also finding out about those people. You find out a lot about, you know, guys that you never knew of. I knew of Mason Ryan as being in Nexus. I knew of him as being sort of, you know, that big, you know, Batista-looking dude. I honestly never knew that he was from Welsh over in the United Kingdom. I never knew that. I thought he was an American guy. His name was Mason Ryan, after all. So you always learn something. I think that was the point of the show. You know, I think he said, you know, the way you help, you know, these indie wrestlers, that he was talking about the guys that once they get released from WWE and they feel like they have nowhere to go and they're going and do these indie shows. If you like them, go support them at the shows. If you love them, buy a t-shirt and wear it around and support them, because that's what wrestling's about. That's number 4 on the list, Colt Cabana, Art of Wrestling. I'll be honest with you, number 4 and number 5 were real easy on the list to put, but the top 3 are shows that I listen to each week. I try to make sure that I listen to every episode that comes out from these guys. But number 3 on the list had to go to the Stone Cold Steve Austin podcast, which I think is just called the Steve Austin podcast. And he also has Austin Unleashed. He has 2 shows that come out, I believe, on Tuesday and Thursday. And, you know, the Tuesday one is the Family Friendly show. On Thursday, it is the Unleashed show, Everything But the Kitchen Sink, where basically you just get to hear Austin come unwound, where he's just cussing up a storm and saying whatever the fuck he wants to. I know that from listening to the older shows, before they rolled out the 2-week plan, he had thought about making the Austin Unleashed show was sort of like a wrestling review, and then he sort of came out and he said that he couldn't do that because he would have felt bad if he was having to use that show to sort of go off on guys and say that things weren't working, and it just sucks. It's things you don't say in the wrestling business about other guys, and and get away with it, I guess you say. He basically thought it wouldn't have been fair, so that rolled into him just having the show where you get to say, shit, piss, fuck, cocksucker, motherfucker, almost, whatever you want to say. But Steve Austin does it all. Austin's show is awesome. When I talked about Jericho's show, saying not being able to listen to his banner, so many times, I download an Austin podcast and I mark out over who the guest is going to be, and I say, this is going to be a great show. And I listen to him talk for 20 minutes. Sometimes it's just him in his camper as he's driving from LA to Texas back and forth with his ranch. Sometimes it's him and his wife talking about her doing Zumba. Sometimes it's him and the guy who is also I've never really found out what Fowler is. If Fowler is the guy who works for him, a guy that co-owns the ranch with him, if it's just his friend that is at the ranch all the time, or if he employs them, I got no clue. Ted Fowler, 316 or something like that on Twitter. And, they talk about everything from sports and tractors, UFC, hunting, and he just talks to you like he's your friend. I mean, like, I remember listening to the first, few months of podcasts, just marking out. Because it's like you're getting to see a whole nother side of Stone Cold Steve Austin that you've never seen. I know that we saw him come out and kick shit in the ring for years, and I know that if you go and watch a few of the DVDs, you get to see him like the Stone Cold Truth, where he does like the sort of sit down interview on a ranch with Jim Ross, and you get to see sort of the way he lives his life. But he talks about his dogs and all that stuff is just great. And sometimes he'll wrap up talking about his life and about what's going on. And then you forget that there's a whole nother part of the show. It's like getting two shows in one. And then he goes on in interviews. With Stone Cold Steve Austin, he's done great interviews with the Daniel Bryan ones were good. If you go back into the sort of the library of shows, there's some of them in there that aren't really the best quality. When he was trying to figure out how to get this thing going, there was for a while when he was in LA and he was driving into the studio in Beverly Hills, and then he started doing the shows at home, trying to do them via Skype, and now he's been able to up his audio quality, where he's now just recording shows on the phone, and it actually sounds pretty good. Jim Ross, who didn't make the list, his show sounds the best because he actually goes into a radio studio and actually does his show in there, where he can do things like take calls or call people or have people in studio if they happen to be around. But Austin's show is just awesome. I love it. It just makes me feel like I actually know who Stone Cold Steve Austin is. He talks about jerking off. He talks about taking shit. So it just makes him like a normal dude, pretty much. Just like Stone Cold being your neighbor almost. I don't know how really to put it. But, when you listen to these people day in, day out, even though you don't know who they are, it's a lot like watching wrestling videos, on YouTube or something like that. It's almost like the person without ever actually meeting them because you know so much about them in their life. But Austin's show is great. I wish I can think of like a download episode to go download right now off the top of your mind. Go listen to the 4-part series with Eric Bischoff, when Eric Bischoff was making his rounds during the I Fired Your Ass tour, pretty much. That's just what I called it, because he did Austin's show, and then it seemed like the very next week he was on JR's show. And pretty much Eric Bischoff went to Stone Cold Steve Austin's house. They sat down, they drank beer, and talked for 4 hours. And they recorded it, and then they uploaded it as 4 different shows. For 2 shows, they just went over the career of Eric Bischoff, and another one, it was almost like a Q&A where people wrote in questions to Stone Cold Steve Austin to ask Eric. So the topics were up and the topics were down. And I think in another one, just people sent questions to Eric Bischoff to ask Stone Cold Steve Austin. But it was a weird pairing, something that I thought I would never see. But then again, you think about how much magic they had in WWE when they were doing, Austin the Sheriff and Bischoff the GM on Raw. So, and that's number 3 on the list. Still got 2 more. Peace out. Number 2 on the list is going to be the Wrestling Observer podcast. I know that a lot of people are going to have negative feelings about the Wrestling Observer podcast because it's a podcast that you have to subscribe to. You have to pay a monthly fee a month, or you have to pay a monthly fee a year up front in order to download the show. And it comes with a ton of content. It's sort of being its own news site with 2 different wrestling newsletters that are published. I'm not sure if they're weekly or if they're updated throughout the week, but one's Figure 4 Weekly and the other one is Wrestling Observer for when they merged in, I believe, 2006 or 2007 or something like that. So you get the best of both worlds. Brian Alvarez is going to be your host of most shows. On 3 shows a week, you get Dave Meltzer, one of the best wrestling minds in wrestling, easily one of the best wrestling encyclopedias there is. They do each show, I think it's Mondays, Wednesdays, and Saturday. And if there is a pay-per-view on a Sunday, whether if it's UFC or WWE, TNA, they always do a wrap-up show of giving results and what they thought of that. At the end of every show, they go through news that is big throughout the day. They'll do special shows whenever a really big news story pops up, so you can go to your iTunes and you already got a show about the thing you're wanting to talk about right now. At the end of every show, they do a question section where people send in questions, and a lot of times there's a ton of questions that come in, and you get to hear different wrestling topics throughout the day because you never know what people are going to write in about. You can send your own in and get those answered, and those are always pretty cool, and they take your time to answer those. As well as that show that comes out, there's shows with other people that Brian has sort of made deals with. There's I can't remember who they are. One's like an Irish guy, and one's just another. I just know that in the intro it says, "I don't like sissies," and he's been doing a gimmick for this month where he's putting up a show every day. He put up a really good one for the 4th of July, talking about mysteries of wrestling, sort of like an unsolved mysteries sort of deal. Not talking about like wrestling angles, but like real life shit that happens where people die and stuff like that. That was pretty cool to listen to. That's Carl. Dragon Carl, so I'm butchering his name. As well as that, that you have special interviews that Brian will book throughout the week. You'll get different wrestlers or people's topics. Talking about things that are going down. For a while he was getting the guys that were getting released from TNA. We had Christopher Daniels on. He had Frankie Kazarian on. You have a lot of the big wrestling stars go through there. WWE guys, not so much. They were able to get Chris Jericho one time because he was booked through whatever network was promoting his TV show that was out, the one that with the fighting robots. I forgot how that ended. I don't know if the series ended or if it got canceled or what happened. But I haven't heard about that in a long time. But you also get shows like where Lance Storm will come on. I think his show is bi-weekly. They talk about everything from Lance, going out and wrestling sporadic shows, or Lance goes down and helps NXT. If they go to WWE, goes to his area, he goes to the shows and meets with the people, and he gives an in-depth talk about what happens at the tapings. And if something sucks in wrestling, if he doesn't like something, he just speaks his mind. It's what Lance Storm has gotten away with because of his cut and dry sort of sense of humor thing, and people really look at him as being a great trainer and knows what he's talking about. So he doesn't really get shit about talking about shit about other people, but he just calls it the way he sees it, which is really good. But for the amount of shows and the amount of time that you get from the Wrestling Observer, it's well worth the price. If you want to just give it a trial, there is no WWE Network sort of free trial with it, but I mean, go to there during a time in wrestling which is hot. Like if you want to wait and try to get the build up to SummerSlam, or the best time is almost when they say their numbers go way up is right before the Royal Rumble through WrestleMania, where they'll just have people sign up on month to month, and they'll get those 3, maybe you include December, so you can sort of get those Rumble rumors. The 4 months of big time news for WWF, they say that's one of their biggest times. But definitely check that out. I also forgot to talk about the show that Brian does with his friend Vinny. Brian and Vinny do a show, I think they do it 3 times a week now, which would be Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Sundays. And on that show, they review everything from Monday Night Raws to Impacts, pay-per-views, Ring of Honor, NXT, Some of the best things that they do, because Brian Alvarez is sort of labeled as sort of like a TNA hater, TNA killer, whatever you want to call it. It's sort of, looked at as if he rips on them, and sometimes TNA puts on a good show and he says it's a good show, but a lot of times stabs him in the back, and it's awesome because he blows a fuse. Because there's a lot of times you watch TNA and you don't know what the fuck's going on. You don't know, why stuff doesn't make sense. It's sort of like, one thing that's, been beaten to death was the Sam Shaw gimmick, where you meet the guy and he has his own apartment, and then 3 weeks later he's living in his mom's basement, and he's always lived there, and it doesn't make any sense. How did he get the apartment? I don't know, but that's just one small example of things going on, and I think his sort of protest of TNA, which was 1 month, comes up this week, so maybe he'll go back to watching. He also has his grandma on the show once a week on Thursdays. She normally does a Q&A session where they talk about her life for a few minutes and talk about what's going on, but as of late, he's put her to work. She watched all of the episodes of Legends House, and now she's watching the episodes of Total Divas, and she's reviewing those, and it's a lot better and it's a lot funnier. At first, when Granny came on the show, she took me a week or two to get used to, but then I've grown to love her and want to give her a big hug. But number 2 on the list, Wrestling Observer. It's one of those things you have to pay for, but I guarantee you, at the end of the day, you're going to see all the amount of content that you get with at least one podcast a day to listen to, at least a 1-hour show, sometimes longer. Don't forget about that Christmas show in December, and well worth it. Number 1 on my list of top wrestling podcasts to listen to is a free one on iTunes that comes to you through Grantland Sports, which is sort of like a partner of ESPN. ESPN having a wrestling podcast is a huge, big deal. On the show is hosted by 2 guys, a radio personality, Rosenberg, and then you also have, which I think is based out of New York City. I don't know a lot about hip-hop, but he has a hip-hop talk show where he spins the records. And then Shoemaker, who's a.k.a. the Masked Man. A lot of you might know him as the guy who wrote Dead Wrestler of the Week. He also has a wrestling book out, which name just sort of escaped me. I almost forgot Rosenberg's name, which would have been a real killer to this. Number 1, I'm really pimping the show out to go out and make sure you download this. But I've really come to enjoy this show. They have one show a week. It comes out on Thursdays. I think they record it on Wednesdays. The opening part of the show, they just talk about wrestling news, which is going around. If it's somebody getting fired, if somebody gets in trouble, this, that, or the other. From there, it sort of rolls into them talking about whatever's going on Monday Night Raw, the hot angle, the hot topic. They've interviewed a few guys along the way. It always ends with one of the coolest things is they have the network pick of the week. With the network pick of the week, they normally will pick one random show, and I've sort of gone with their network pick of the week, and I've always found a good show to go along with. They always find good things. The best thing about it is the banter between the two. They don't always agree. It's not like PTI where they just openly debate. Sometimes one guy says, "I love this," and the other guy says, "I love that too." And sometimes one conversation will start, with a topic about what's going on today, and the next thing you know, you're talking about 1990 Survivor Series, and it's just sort of, how 2 people just have a conversation, and they start, just talking, and they forget they're on the radio, and it goes all the way. Definitely make sure you download the Cheap Heat podcast. It's one of my favorites. I think almost every time I listen to a show, I've been able to sit down and make some sort of wrestling topic discussion video. I know I made my top 5 kings of wrestling video based off of that, and I know that a few times during the whole CM Punk deal, I was able to make CM Punk videos talking about the topics that they were talking about and just giving my side of what I was thinking about what was going down. They don't have a lot of guests come through there. They had Matt Hardy on a few weeks ago. They had Jim Ross on one time. When they were doing WrestleMania, they had their WrestleMania Spectacular where they were there live on Radio Row. And they had Cesaro was on the show. Justin Roberts was on the show. I think another wrestler was on there, but I can't really remember. They said they were there at a weird time where basically they were the only people on Radio Row, and people thought that they weren't even supposed to be there. But definitely number one podcast that I listen to. I love these guys. I wish that they would find a way to do this show more often. I know that they both live busy lives, doing what they do, one being a writer, one being on the radio. But if they were able to expand this to go 2 shows, maybe go Tuesdays, where you can sort of get their after Raw thoughts, and then maybe keep the Thursday show, and then sort of talk about the news that is coming out of the SmackDown tapings or something like that along the way. I love it. I love the way that they talk about wrestling, and they don't really they space spoiler alert, but they're not scared to go off of kayfabe and talk about what's really going on in wrestlers' lives and things like that, and just sort of keep it straight, just sort of real man's talk, I guess you can say. But that's number one. Make sure you go to download all 5 of those shows. I'm guaranteeing that you'll love it. Hopefully you'll go over and you'll download Bobby and Cake on Hawk's Irish Whipcast as well. Chris Jericho, Art of Wrestling, Steve Austin Show, Wrestling Observer. I can't do that one that well. Can't go from 3 to 4 without, now 5. Bam! Now it's looking good. Cheap Heat through Grantland Sports. All available on iTunes. Peace out.